Hello and welcome to the Learning Support Training for Fall 2017 at Georgia Highlands College. I am Josh Peterson. I'm an academic advisor on the Cartersville campus. If at any point you have questions after reading through this PowerPoint and going through this session, my email is at the bottom of the screen, and feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. Today I'm going to cover some basic rules of learning support, some things that have changed, some things that are staying the same, and then kind of touch on each math and English learning support class as well as the FCST 1010 College Experience class. So to start out with some basic rules regarding learning support, for those of you who don't know, all students who are placed into learning support are required to take those courses their very first semester and continue through the learning support sequence until the learning support credit level course is passed. So that would be Math 1001, Math 1111, or English 1101. They're required to take that as required by the USG. Any time that a student does not take that class their first semester, they have to do a one-time waiver to agree to take the class the very next semester. Such situation might be a student who attends a late orientation, who was only offered one learning support class that's available at the last minute. So maybe there's a 2 to 3:15 class and the student works during that time. At that point, if that was the only section available, they could then do a one-time waiver because the class that's offered is not working with their schedule. An example that would not qualify would be a student who does not enjoy the subject of math and wants to take their learning support class the next semester because they simply don't want to. That's not going to qualify as a good enough reason. Another thing, learning support students are limited to certain classes, so you can refer to the handouts on our advising website under faculty resources or in the catalog to kind of figure out what specific classes that learning support students can take based on what class that they're placed in. So depending on if they're at the foundations level or the co-requisite level for their learning support, they may be allowed to take certain classes that first semester or the next semester is moving forward. So always try to ask questions whenever you have a situation that maybe you're unsure of as far as what classes they're allowed to take. Another thing that I've found a lot of people at Georgia Highlands do not know is that failing the foundations level course twice actually leads to dismissal from USG institutions for 1 year. So whether that's the Math 0987 quantitative reasoning, Math 0989 college algebra, or the English 0989 English composition learning support. If any student fails those courses twice, then they're going to be required to sit out a year. So if you're ever working with a student and maybe you notice that they've already failed the class once and you're maybe advising or registering them for the next semester that they're retaking it, try to bring that up to the student that this is their last chance to pass the class before they'll have to sit out a year if they fail again. Last bullet here is just going over the English Placement Index, Math Placement Index. So as you may know, we switched over to the AccuPlacer test instead of the Compass test for initial placement into math and English courses. So students are now required to take the AccuPlacer, and in combination with the AccuPlacer, there's high school GPA and the SAT or ACT score. Those three kind of combine into a placement index score for math and English. And based on that score, we can kind of determine what course is appropriate for them to start out in. So on this next slide, we'll look at the chart for English and math. As far as the score that they bring in, we can then determine what course that they need to be in. If they need a learning support course, or if you notice for the English Placement Index, if they have a 4230 index score or higher, then they're going to be considered out of learning support. They can go straight into the English 1101, which is the credit level first English class. For math, it can get a little more confusing. If you notice the third row, 1165 to 1264, those students are going to be considered out of learning support. If they happen to be a STEM pathway, so maybe they're a business major or they're a science type pathway, those students are going to be taking college algebra. In that case, they're actually going to be required to take a learning support class, the co-requisite Math 0999. On the non-STEM side, if you notice under the statistics path placement, those students are not going to be required to take the Math 0997 co-requisite. They're still going to be considered out of learning support on both sides, whether they're STEM or non-STEM. But on the STEM side, again, they're going to have to take a learning support class. It is a little confusing, and the other thing that I will say about that is those students in the 1165 to 1264 range are not going to be required to take FCST 1010, the college experience course that is required for regular students in learning support. So another way to quickly tell what they need would be just to review their holds, and I'll talk more about the FCST class later on and what those requirements are, when students can exempt from that, and so on. So now we're going to jump into each individual class with Math 0987. This is the foundations of quantitative reasoning. This is the biggest change for fall of 2017. Before fall 2017, it has been 4 credit hours, and any student who make an A, B, or a C in Math 0987 could go straight into 1001. And if a student has the 4-hour credit moving forward, they can still go straight into 1001 without Math 0997. However, starting this fall, we did change Math 0987 to 3 credit hours, and this is something that the USG did, that they found that students would only need basically an hour and 15 minutes for a class period as opposed to an hour and 50 for the quantitative reasoning side. And I'll touch on the algebra side in a minute, the algebra class that is actually staying at 4 credit hours. But the Math 0987 is now 3 credit hours starting in fall of 2017. So that means moving forward, starting spring of 18, so when we're registering students for spring, we need to make sure that we're actually registering for Math 0997 and Math 1001, regardless of where they think they may place as far as their final grade in Math 0987. If it's an A, they're not going to be required to take Math 0997. If they get a B or a C, they will have to take it. But when we're actually registering the student, if we're advising them before, during a fall semester or during a future semester moving forward, they're going to be required to register for both the 0997 and 1001. It won't be until they get their final grade, and if it happens to be an A, at that point, the student can opt out and drop 0997, or they can get an advisor to help them with that. We'll also be monitoring roles and schedules just to make sure that students who do not need that extra help don't take a class that they don't need. On the college algebra side, the foundations level, Math 0989, this is staying the same, like I said, and still going to be 4 credit hours, so it's a little confusing here with the STEM side being 4 hours, 0989, and then the non-STEM, like I was just talking about, changing to 3 hours. All students who make an A, B, or C in Math 0989 are still going to go into both the Math 0999 and 1111 together their next semester. So regardless of if they make an A or B or C, they're still going to go into both of those. So nothing's changed there, same rules, but I wanted to cover that as well. On the English side, foundations of English composition. For this one, if they make an A or a B, they can go straight into English 1101. And if they make a C, we're going to require them to take the co-requisite English 0999. The way that this one works is we're actually going to allow them to register for just English 1101. So unlike the Math 0987 students who we're going to be registering for both the 0997 and 1001, for English, we're actually going to just register them for 1101. And then when we wind up seeing if students get a C in English 0989, we're going to be going back and adding that English 0999 to their next semester schedule. So once final grades come in, that'll be an effort on part of the advisors and even faculty who are teaching those classes to look over roles, make sure anyone who made a C has that prerequisite class to kind of help them along the way through English 1101 their next semester. And lastly, just to talk about FCST 1010 for a minute, this is a class that will be phasing out probably in the next year. But as of right now, any student who is placed into learning support has to take FCST 1010. The only real way that they can exempt from FCST would be if they transferred in 12 or more credit hours. I mentioned the EPI and MPI scores earlier. I'm going to go to that chart in a second. But if any student transfers in credit from another institution and they happen to have 12 or more hours, we're going to assume that they have a semester under their belt and they're going to be able to succeed at Georgia Highlands without that FCST class. So those students are not going to be required to take it. We don't expect all of you to know this or evaluate a full transcript to see, what they transferred in and that sort of thing. We're just going to ask that you look at the holds. So the easiest way to tell if a student needs FCST, just look at their holds. If they do need it, they're going to have an FCST 1010 required under their holds. And that way we can make sure that we're not making any errors. The other thing that I mentioned earlier about the 1165 to 1264 range for the Math Placement Index, as you can see again here, those students are not in learning support, so they do not have to take FCST 1010. Any students who don't take FCST 1010 also will need a waiver, just like I was talking about earlier with the learning support classes, whether they were math or English. Any student who can't take FCST their very first semester for any reason, they're going to have to fill out a waiver as well. And so back to this slide for one more thing. Many students are unaware, learning support students, that their FCST 1010 class does count for their PE elective. So it will not show you that in the scorecard. If you're ever working with a student and you pull up their scorecard and you notice it's counting it in the elective hours instead of the PE elective, that is actually something that's on the registrar's side. As far as students who aren't in learning support, they would not get that class to count for that requirement, so we can't actually plug that into the appropriate area and scorecard. But it's always good to remind a student, if you ever notice they have FCST 1010 credit already, remind them that they do have that, that's going to be counting for their PE elective. And this is something that will be confirmed through the registrar's office when they do petition to graduate. They'll confirm that that does count there. But any student who's not in a learning support class that tries to take FCST 1010, maybe for personal enrichment or for financial aid purposes, if they just want, maybe an easier class or something like that, it's not going to count towards their degree. So if you ever have a student that, asks about the class, maybe wants to take it, but they're unsure of what it is or where it would count towards their degree, if they're not in learning support, it's not going to count for them. So any other questions, if you have after viewing this slideshow, feel free to reach back out to me. And again, my name is Josh Peterson. I'm an academic advisor on the Cartersville campus. My office is located in the hub. And any questions you have, feel free to reach back out to me.
Hello, everyone, and thank you guys for watching this information session. I'm hoping you just already learned about the new learning support changes from Josh Peterson. Once you get done with our information sessions, we do have a short assessment where you just go answer some questions, and that way that we can record that you have completed our advising information session. We have been so successful so far, so we've had 70 people be a part of these, so I'm really excited to see that advising is important to everyone, and I'm so happy to have the help from you guys, our faculty or staff that are helping in our advising efforts. It's not just a department, it is going to be institution-wide. I'm Laura Walton, the advising coordinator. I'm located at the Cartersville campus. My email is lwalton@highlands.edu, and feel free to take my cell phone number, 770-546-5534. I welcome texts or phone calls with any advising questions at any point. So let's get started. The purpose of this information session, if you're a veteran that's been here for a while, if you have done EBA for several years, or if you're brand new to Georgia Highlands, maybe you're not even going to be responsible for being a part of our EBA this year. Either way, we want for this session to re-energize you, to kind of shift your focus from getting started this fall semester to advising. So this is going to be talking about why we do EBA, when is EBA, what is EBA, and what do we do to get them to come to EBA. And then finally, we are at the EBA appointment and how we actually will have our EBA session. I think I can admit that with myself doing EBA sessions that sometimes I get a little lazy and sometimes I try to be short and I don't have a lot of time and I might just kind of rush through things. So this kind of reminds us of the importance of early bird advising too. So let's get started. What is EBA? So EBA, which is going to be different than your typical advising that you do maybe in the classroom, it's going to be long-term intrusive advising. So I had not even heard of intrusive advising until we got Dr. Green, and he's a big fan. I know a lot of us are fans of intrusive advising. So intrusive advising is not just looking at this person as our student, but how we fit into their lives. So a person who might be working full-time, a working parent, someone who's come back after several years or even decades to school, and kind of looking at them in the big picture. So we're going to ask a lot of questions. We're going to say things like, how has college been? So you've come back after 17 years, let's say. How has it been going for you? How have your children been doing with you being away, coming to classes? How has everything been working out? Asking probing questions about, their history in high school possibly. What are some subjects they've been interested in? That is going to be your long-term intrusive advising. Also at EBA, we would like to give them a plan to their completion. So associate's degree, we want all our students to get associate's degrees. We want to make sure we're explaining to them the importance of an associate's degree. I always tell students when they say, but why, when I know I'm going to go get a bachelor's degree, why do I need to get an associate's degree? The best answer I have that I like to say is life. So life happens. So I have a friend, Megan, who got her business associate's degree from Georgia Highlands. I think then it was actually Floyd. And she graduated. She decided she wanted to be a nurse. 9 years later, she got through school somehow, and she's a nurse. All along through those 9 years, she was an office manager because she had her business associates. We also want to give them the plan for their next several semesters. So talking about, this is when you're going to take your accounting 1 so you can have your accounting 2 the next semester. We're going to give them this fall semester. We're going to certainly talk about spring semester classes, talk about if they're going to come summer, what they need to do for next fall, a long-term plan. EBA this fall is October 2nd through the 20th. If a student does EBA, they'll be able to register October 30th. If a student does not do EBA, they will register November 6th. If a student has an EBA note in their scorecard back to the first day of fall classes up until October 29th, they'll be eligible to register early for spring semester and for fall of 18. So ultimately, a student is only required to do EBA once a year. They can do it again in the spring if they do want to, but hopefully they felt good after this fall semester and everything's working out, so they'll probably just look back at their notes from their EBA session they did the previous semester. So why do we do EBA? So this is something that we feel very passionately about in our advising department, and why we have EBA. The main reason is a one-on-one connection. So if we look at this next slide, this kind of gives you the image of a student's first term at Georgia Highlands. So we've recruited them. They have applied to Georgia Highlands. They picked us. They've turned in all their documentation. They've gotten their lawful presence, their transcripts, whatever obstacles they might have in front of them, and then they've been accepted. Once they get accepted, we then have to get them to come to an orientation. And you'll see at that orientation, we have it in a big starburst. And that's because that is the first one-on-one talk about me time. So when they sit down with you guys at an orientation and they are having their advising session, not only is this the first one-on-one time at orientation where they get to actually speak to someone, but this is also the first time that they've actually sat down, most likely, with someone and had a good long talk about them, their major, their pathway, and what their plans are. So we've gotten them through orientation, we've gotten them registered for classes. Then we have to get them to pay their tuition or get their financial aid in order. All of these obstacles are things that can prevent them from actually coming to class. So these students who are going to be coming to EBA have come to class now, and they've stayed in class. So we have done our job of getting them here, getting them to Highlands, getting them in the right classes. Here we are, the middle of fall semester. Now it's time for early bird advising. So guess what? This is their second chance of that one-on-one talk about me time. You'll see the last time they had was at orientation. So imagine if this is their second or third term, if they've not done early bird advising, this might be one of their first interactions to sit down with someone for them to see that, to talk about them and their success at Highlands. So the other reason is mentorship. So that's something that I think that our faculty advisors will be able to really help out more than we really can. You guys know more about professional affiliations, about working in the field for which they want to major in. And I think that any kind of connection they can get with some sort of professional in that field is going to be helpful for them in the long run. This is also our overall retention effort for Georgia Highlands College. It's almost like a grassroots effort that we can help in retention. We don't have to spend any money to do it. All we have to do is take the time, spend the time with these students, and let them know that we are here for them and that we care and that we are a resource for them. And we also want to do it because we love our students. So the best thing you can do for promoting EBA is to talk about it in class. We did a survey about 2 years ago, and we talked about how did you hear about EBA? We thought it was our little birds and our posters and our signs, but between 80 and 90% of students said that they actually learned about EBA in their classroom. So continue to do what you've been doing and promoting it in your classes. Professional advisors are also available to come and talk to you and meet with your students and tell them about EBA as well. D2L announcements would be great. And also offering appointments through Collaborate or Skype or Zoom as alternatives to in-person meetings. We still have the eScheduler calendar. It's pretty quick and easy. Some people love it. Some people hate it. It is still there. And it's a really good tool to help get students to sign up for early bird advising. Okay, so let's talk about at the actual EBA appointment. On our website and under early bird advising, under faculty resources, you can find the EBA appointment checklist. And it's going to give you kind of an outline or a guide of what a typical EBA session should look like. So I'm going to go show you how to find it on our website at advising.highlands.edu. If you go to faculty resources, and then we're going to go to early bird advising. And just so you know, we also have a new vanity URL for our students. You can tell them to get more information about EBA by going to eba.highlands.edu. So here's a lot of the handouts we created over the last year or so. We've got the eScheduler handout. We have this EBA training listed there. This is the EBA checklist though. So this is what we think would be helpful for you to have to talk to your students. I would go ahead and print out a couple copies, have them ready for your appointments. The first thing we're going to do is access the student scorecard. We have to have that scorecard there, not only just to show them and make sure they understand that that's available to them in their score account, but we also have to put the EBA note in there so that they'll be able to register early. We're going to first verify that the student's program of study is correct, and if it's not, we're going to make sure that they change it. In the score account, we have the what if function. And in the what if function, we can go and see if they want to change their major, what it would look like, and how their courses that they've already taken will go towards a new major. So we're going to go in, log into a score account real quick so you can see how to get there. Here we're going to see their name. We're going to make sure that their major is correct. The next thing I'd like to challenge you all to do is make sure when we're talking to them that we're showing them if they have any type of holds. So you can see any registration holds here. Back on our website, we have a form where you can go and see what to do if they do have a registration hold. What we don't want to do is for them to go log into their score account after they've done their EBA session and they have a hold and they're not going to be able to register themselves. We've lost them again. So we want to make sure we're looking at these holds right here and we're going to make sure we tell them what to do if they have a hold. If you go back to our website, there is also a student resources section. And this is where you can find how to register for classes. I've learned a couple of things through these sessions that faculty might not be fully aware of how a student registers for classes. We're going to have students look up classes in course offerings, so you can click here under current students and look up classes not in their score account. Then we're going to go and show them they need to do advising, they need to create their schedule, they need to check their holds, and finally they'll register for classes. We also have this PDF that's interactive where they can go and they can click on course offerings. It's going to take them directly there. And it's going to also show them how, if they do have holds, how to understand your holds and also how to register through a professional advisor. All right. The last thing that we want to make sure that we do when they leave is we need to make sure that we're putting in that EBA note that shows that they have come to an EBA session, and then we're going to make sure we ask them that question. So we want to say, are you familiar with how to register for classes at Georgia Highlands? If they need any help beyond that, if that handout is not doesn't help them at all, have them come see us. We can also reset their score pin if they need us to. But ultimately, we want to just make sure they are getting the information that they need, if it's through you guys, if it's through us, just to get them registered for classes. That is all I have for this EBA information session. If you will please go back to the original email that this was shared on and complete the assessment. That way we'll be able to show who all has attended these sessions. And if you have any questions, you can always email me, lwalton@highlands.edu. And we also have our advising@highlands.edu ticketing system for you or for students. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good day.